Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so very much for tuning in. Hit subscribe to this channel right now. Your super chat support is greatly appreciated. Ladies and gentlemen, you want to talk about anything, especially the upcoming Brennan indictment, please go ahead via super chat as well as the live chat. Ladies and gentlemen, CNN, ex-FBI director and ex-CIA director Brennan under investigation by Trump Justice Department. We know now that James Comey is under indictment. There will be a superseding indictment, almost certainly. The indictment there's not much to it, and it's very broad and vague, which points to more charges for James Comey. Very likely there will be conspiracy statutes at some point. Brennan is almost certainly going to be not only indicted, but indicted for perjury and under conspiracy statutes. Hit subscribe to this channel right now. Check this out, ladies and gentlemen. I will also be doing a lot of work on H.A. Goodman's other channel as well. So hit subscribe to that. That is within the homepage of this channel. And the other channel will be renamed, and I will go ahead and actually talk about sports and a whole bunch of other things that have nothing to do with politics. But H.A. Goodman's other channel, subscribe to that. Ladies and gentlemen, let's get started. This is a blast from the past. Check this out. The Durham probe is going to indict all these people, because the Durham probe falls well within the statute of limitations.
Attorney John Durham expanding the scope of his probe into alleged surveillance on the 2016 Trump campaign, and now looking into a wider timeline up to when Robert Mueller was named special counsel. This comes as Mueller faces new scrutiny over potential conflicts of interest in his investigation. He forgot he was actually applying for a job. Here to react is former chairman of the House Oversight Committee, Fox News contributor, and author of Power Grab, the best-selling book, Jason Chaffetz. Jason, so what does it mean that Durham says I'm expanding it and I'm not going to probably release it until next year?
It's really bad news for people like Mr. Brennan, who was the director of the CIA. I think Mr. Clapper also has something to answer for. The fact that he's expanding the probe means there's something real there. And now he's been looking at this for months on end now. There is a lot more information out there. The timeline is interesting to say that he's going to take so long to put it out there. I think they're tired of all this speculation of when they're going to release or when they're going to charge people. If you set that date way out in advance, then you can exceed those expectations. I think it's just the expectation game. But I would suspect that he would come out much sooner than that.
Well, I would think, because if he has the most comprehensive report possible, if President Trump is in his second term or there's another president, it's going to have minimal interest, even though it will have impact to the people involved.
The most important thing that's going to happen that is going, I mean, literally, it could happen today. It could happen, most people suspect it'll be next week, is the Horowitz report. This will be the third report that is out there. The battle that's going on behind the scenes from several people I've spoken with is to what degree is it classified? Last time, there were only 7 words or so that were redacted. This one could be as much as 10 or 20% of the report.
So I want to start this off, and for people who kind of don't know what's going on, they might say, well, why are you starting off the Durham probe? That led to nothing. The Durham probe led to testimony that Tulsi Gabbard now, and we're going to hear Tulsi Gabbard. This is Caroline Levitt introducing Tulsi Gabbard. But the Durham probe has testimony where you had Comey, where you had definitely Brennan and others within the Durham probe committing perjury almost certainly. So that's the issue. Ladies and gentlemen, I've been spot on pretty much everything. Have I not told you Comey's going to get indicted for the past 9 years? I've been telling you this. I'm telling you Brennan's going to get indicted. I'm telling you eventually Hillary Clinton will as well. And there will be a trial for all of these people, almost certainly. They'll get indicted. Whether there's a trial, there will be a trial for most of them, almost all of them. And it's going to be very difficult for them to win a trial. Okay, check this out, ladies and gentlemen.
Brennan's statements have attracted the interest of U.S. Attorney John Durham. John Kirikou is interested in what he said because he's a former CIA officer and a whistleblower who went to jail for doing less than John Brennan apparently has done. And what about that point, John? Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
But you, as someone whose life was turned completely upside down, was kind of destroyed for a while, see a guy like Brennan just committing perjury in public and nobody cares. How does that make you feel?
That seems to be what we're seeing now. If the New York Times is to be believed, John Brennan was saying one thing on Capitol Hill and on MSNBC, where he's now a paid talking head, and saying another thing internally to his own people and Jim Comey, who was FBI director at the time. So we know that that John Durham, the U.S. attorney for the state of Connecticut, who's doing this investigation, has now asked for and will receive call logs from John Brennan, emails from John Brennan during the time that he was the CIA director, as well as contemporaneous notes that Brennan took when he was meeting with these other leaders. So what are we looking at here? Are we looking at one of these or many of these process crimes, making a false statement, perjury, conspiracy? That seems to be what John Durham is thinking of. And just a couple of weeks ago, Tucker, John Durham said that his investigation is not an inquiry. It's an investigation, and it's a criminal one.
So whether you had William Barr or Merrick Garland, nobody was going to go after or indict John Brennan or Comey. That was never, ever, ever going to happen. Okay, you needed Pam Bondi. You needed a new Department of Justice. And the government shutdown is sad, but also quite amusing, almost hilarious, because Democrats don't realize that Trump and President Trump's administration want to start over. So when people are like, I'm leaving, it's like, well, okay, you were a loyalist to the Democratic Party. I'm not saying everyone in the government is a loyalist. I'm saying there were a lot of people, whether you call it the swamp or whatever unit party, they were loyalists of the Democratic Party or the Never Trump Republican Party working in government. So if a potential government shutdown takes place, well, you're going to get like thousands and thousands of people, including at the Justice Department or Pentagon or DOD or other intel agencies that might leave, which is exactly what President Trump wants. And Democrats are like, people are going to leave the government. It's like, you're not getting it, Democrats. You don't understand. But anyway, John Kiriakou is a patriot. He is a patriot. I have a great deal of respect for this man. And let's continue.
Brennan would have had to have known this, correct? I mean, he was at the very center of this. For him to say confidently the Steele dossier played no role in the FISA warrants, like just common sense tells you he would likely have known that to be untrue when he said it.
Absolutely. Just like he would have known that the Steele dossier began as opposition research.
Paid like Suede, thank you so very much. To my super chat, your support is so greatly appreciated. Paid like Suede, so wonderful to have you here on this live stream. Thank you so very much. Let's continue with John Kiriakou. Thank you, Paid like Suede.
But he wasn't honest about that, and neither was Jim Comey. We know that they lied to the FISA court. We know that they lied multiple times to the FISA court in order to renew the warrant against Carter Page. I think that at that level, with everything being classified and with their arrogance at the same time, I think that they think they can just get away with it, that the truth isn't going to come out at the end. And now it looks like it will come out.
I want to, because I love the country and I spent my life here, I want to believe in our justice system, but you see Roger Stone facing, in effect, life in prison.
That's right.
Over lying about much less. You see the whistleblower venerated as a Christ figure. You're a legitimate whistleblower, and you went to jail. Mm-hmm. And you got to sort of wonder, actually, is this on the level? I'm sorry to say it.
Well, I was talking about this with my children the other day, and they asked essentially the same question. And I said, when I was growing up, I just always assumed that adults were smarter than kids and that adults were fair because they were adults. And we've all come to realize that that's just simply not true.
Well, John Kiriakou knows this better than anyone, and the bureaucracy, government bureaucracy, is what shielded Brennan and Comey and Clapper and all of the people that went after and framed Trump. Hillary Clinton had 3 different, paywalls between her and the Steele dossier, a law firm, another company, a foreign operative, the DNC. I mean, the Democratic Party used bureaucracy in the most vile, sinister manner. And these are the same people who are offended at words. And they will have no qualms about trying to crush and, just destroy lives with a fake, phony hoax. They set up and framed Trump. But the thing is, now we have all the emails. Kash Patel, Pam Bondi, John Ratcliffe. John Ratcliffe already stated that Brennan and others are at legal criminal liability. They face criminal liability. That was, I believe, the term from John Ratcliffe.
People have political axes to grind. Sometimes karma is a real thing, and sometimes there is justice in the end. Perhaps this will be one of those
I
times.
think, and I have no inside information, unlike John Brennan. I don't have a top secret security clearance, but I think karma's coming for him.
It's coming.
I think that's right. John, great to see you tonight.
Well, it took 5 more years. No, yeah, 5 more years. Okay. This was from 2020. Okay. And before we get to the testimony from Brennan, and the hilarious thing is that Schiff and others, they also face criminal prosecution for potential mortgage fraud. But Carter Page was somebody that was completely, they tried to destroy this man's life simply because they wanted to set up and frame Trump. Check this out. This is, by the way, more about James Comey, but also Brennan as well. Check this out.
Welcome back to the show, former Trump campaign advisor. He's the author of the book, Abuse and Power. He is Carter Page. Hey, Carter, it's great to have you back on. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Liz. Great.
By the way, buy his book. It's on Amazon. Fantastic book, along with George Papadopoulos' book as well. Bureaucracy, government bureaucracy was leveled against innocent people by the same liberal Democrats that are offended by words.
Great to be with you.
Okay, let's break down what happened today. Carter, former FBI Director James Comey claimed today in Senate testimony that he only found out about various negative details about the FBI abuses of the Trump-Russia probe after the fact, years after he left the agency, and by reading government watchdog reports on FISA court abuse when he signed off on the FISA court wiretaps on you. Do you believe James Comey here?
Well, I think there's still a huge number of questions, and unfortunately today, as the onion continued to get pulled back, we just learned about additional open questions, and a lot of things exactly along the lines of what you're alluding to, Liz, really do not add up. So I think there's huge open questions.
You know, he knew details enough, James Comey, when he wrote down in notes that Flynn's phone call with the Russian ambassador, quote, appeared legit in that Oval Office meeting in early January 2017 with President Barack Obama and Joe Biden and others. Let's break down what happened today. Comey testified he didn't know whether he knew Christopher Steele's sub-source, the main source was a suspected Russian spy, when it turns out he was, that he really didn't have details why the FBI went ahead and used that information to spy on you. He didn't really know about anti-Trump opposition research financed by Democrats and more. Let's listen to James Comey today.
I would say in the main, it was done by the book. It was appropriate and it was essential that it be done.
Okay. So you're proud of it?
Overall, I'm proud of the work.
Does the FBI director have any responsibility to make sure the facts are right when they're given to the...
He can't even say he's proud of a specific thing that he did. Everything is a deposition. Overall, I'm proud of the work. Oh, but didn't you just say that there was a FISA warrant or whatever it was that he was specifically talking about? Oh, it had to be done, so you're proud of it. Overall, I'm proud of the work. It's deposition mode 24/7 with Comey, but it's misleading. These people lied, but they did so by lying by omission. They lied by omission, and it was allowed. In the bureaucratic paradigm, you can lie by omission and still be deemed telling the truth. However, in a court of law, the prosecution, the government has almost all of Comey and Brennan and almost all the emails, almost all the text messages, almost if they have private servers, they have all that information too. So, I mean, it's going to be very difficult for them not to be convicted.
court?
Not in connection with the certification, but in general, the FBI director is responsible for everything that's being done underneath the FBI director. I don't remember any information reaching me about any investigation of a source of steals. I don't remember anything about interviews of the subsource.
This is not just an abuse of power against Mr. Page and the Trump campaign. This is a system failure. And you could be next. How could all that happen and not get up to you, the director of the FBI, of one of the most important investigations in the history of the FBI? How is that possible?
I can only speculate because it didn't.
Okay, Carter, do you believe James Comey here?
I have huge open questions, and I don't like to pass judgment on anyone, Liz, because I was falsely accused myself, but a lot of things definitely do not add up. And in terms of his point about, well, who's responsible for what, et cetera, I really, you know, when I was an officer in the U.S. Navy, if the captain of my ship or the executive officer, if that ship runs aground or has some other disaster, you know, the senior management are responsible. And I think Chairman Graham and other members of the committee today were absolutely right that someone needs to be held accountable and be responsible for this terrible abuse of power, as he correctly labeled it.
Okay, the FBI Counterintelligence Division, which includes Peter Strzok, investigated the Russian spy who gave disinformation to Christopher Steele that Hillary Clinton's campaign and Democrats, the DNC, helped finance. So they knew it. They knew he was a Russian spy. What is your reaction to that, given the fact that the FBI used that, got that information and used it in part to devise the wiretaps to spy on you, thinking that you were a Russian asset?
Another perfect example is of how nothing in this whole scam makes sense one bit. The concept that he couldn't have known anything, particularly when I sent him a letter on September 25th, 2016, explaining everything and offering to meet with him or members of the FBI who I had helped for over a decade, and as well as the CIA and other groups. So many open questions, so many things that really made absolutely no sense whatsoever.
Yeah. So they knew a lot about you and still went after you, but didn't investigate the Clinton campaign using Russian disinformation from the get-go to try to,
They literally used a dossier that was purchased. Hillary Clinton and the Democratic National Committee purchased a dossier or a compilation of nonsense and fabricated lies to set up and frame innocent people like Carter Page. Hey, at that point, Michael Cohen was innocent as well. I mean, Michael Cohen, I believe, was suing BuzzFeed, which is why he says Comey will be found guilty on MSNBC. Everyone was innocent, and what they did, especially President Trump, and what they did was they ensnared everybody from George Papadopoulos to Carter Page to Michael Cohen and President Trump and everyone around him. And it was a hoax. It was the most sinister, diabolical lie. And there were 30% of Democrats, according to one poll, that still believe the lie. And these are people who hyperventilate about information that misinforms. And it's not only misinformation, because that is a euphemism also. They never say it's false. The Democrats also usually never say that something is false information. It's completely false. They say it's misinformation because they don't like the argument presented. Because it goes against, let's say, an appeal to authority. So they show it's misinformation. What they did is perpetrate, or they spread completely false information. It wasn't the Steele dossier, the Russia hoax was not misinformation. It wasn't information that misinformed. It was false information deliberately meant to deceive. Absolutely nobody on the planet thought that Trump really was a spy of the Kremlin. When it came to the intelligence, people high up in intelligence, Comey knew. They all knew. Brennan knew. And that's why Brennan couldn't say that he had evidence. That's why Schiff never stated he had direct evidence. That's why these people never said that they had evidence. It was all, and you had millions of Americans who wanted to believe a lie. They could not possibly accept that Trump had defeated them.
Cook up this Russia collusion theory. That's the allegation that is coming out from the DNI Ratcliffe declassification. So you see how circular and weird this is. Final question. I know you're not an expert in this, but this involves you. Basically, James Comey testifying throughout the day that he didn't remember. We just showed it. Do you think FBI officials are worried that they will be accused of committing perjury before the FISA court by misleading the FISA court and not disclosing information about the sealed dossier and more? What's your take on that?
I think they have a huge amount to be worried about, and with the fact that the senators are now really turning up the heat, I'm glad you have Congressman Collins on, because he's one of the few who has really pushed for the truth and pushed for justice. And I'm glad that the Senate Judiciary, under Chairman Graham's leadership, are taking serious steps in that direction.
So Carter Page also was a patriot and was treated in such a terrible manner. Now, before we get to Brennan's testimony, let's listen to Tulsi Gabbard.
Correct information that Russian President Vladimir Putin wanted to help elect President Trump in 2016. And in fact, Russia was actively preparing for a Hillary Clinton victory. But at the unusual direction of Barack Obama at the time, the intel community published implausible intelligence suggesting otherwise. Why? To sabotage the incoming president. This is truly one of the greatest political scandals in American history. And reporters at legacy outlets, some of which are sitting in this room today, like the New York Times and the Washington Post, were ridiculously awarded Pulitzer Prizes for their perpetuation of this hoax.
The Pulitzer Prize, just like the Academy Awards or an Emmy, these things used to be like prestigious throughout the country. They're only prestigious and cherished now among the small circle within the industry, let's say, and only within a political side within that industry. These things used to be part of Americana, like just the Academy Awards, watching the Academy Awards. Now it's like a, Democratic Party rally. And so, that's why the movie business is losing money every year. That's why late night loses money. That's why you had publications going out of business. Before the internet and before this tribalism, after 2016, especially after 2016, but even before, let's say 2000, the early 2000s, okay? Before the internet and you had cell phones and social media. Let's say before social media, when you were, Letterman or Leno or Johnny Carson or Arsenio Hall, you had to relate to the entire country. You couldn't simply do what Jimmy Kimmel did and speak to half the country or less than half the country. Jimmy Kimmel should get an award from the Democratic Party. He is literally a campaign wing, he's a late night campaign, endless campaign donation. He has nothing to do with free speech. Almost certainly you have late night comedians that have writers or producers or people at the networks directly communicating with the Democratic Party in some way, whether they're, liaisons in between or directly to Congress people. We saw that with Colbert, with one of his staff, a bunch of his staff, or one of the characters on the show was at the Capitol and then got arrested or something like that. This was years back. But they set up and framed Trump, and Brennan was, part of the people who orchestrated all of it. And he's going to get indicted almost certainly very soon.
It's well past time for those awards to be stripped from the journalists who receive them. It is not journalism to propagate political disinformation in service of the Democrat Party and those in the intelligence community who hand over out of context and fake intelligence to push a false political narrative. I will now pass it over to the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, to speak more about all of this, and then we will open it up for questions afterwards. Tulsi, thank you for being here.
Want to save big on your energy bills?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. At President Trump's direction and with the support and coordination with the House Intelligence Committee Chairman Rick Crawford, today we've released a declassified Oversight Majority Staff report that was produced in September of 2020. The stunning revelations that we are releasing today should be of concern to every American. This is not about Democrats or Republicans. This has to do with the integrity of our democratic republic and American voters having faith that the votes cast will count. There is irrefutable evidence that detail how President Obama and his national security team directed the creation of an intelligence community assessment that they knew was false. They knew it would promote this contrived narrative that Russia interfered in the 2016 election to help President Trump win, selling it to the American people as though it were true. It wasn't. The report that we released today shows in great detail how they carried this out. They manufactured findings from shoddy sources. They suppressed evidence and credible intelligence that disproved their false claims. They disobeyed traditional tradecraft intelligence community standards and withheld the truth from the American people. In doing so, they conspired to subvert the will of the American people who elected Donald Trump in that election in November of 2016. They worked with their partners in the media to promote this lie, ultimately to undermine the legitimacy of President Trump and launching what would be a years-long coup against him and his administration. We're here today because the American people deserve the truth, they deserve accountability, and they deserve justice. The records that we released on Friday that were ODNI records, Senator Chuck Grassley's release on Monday of what is known as the Clinton Annex, which was an appendix to the Department of Justice Office of Inspector General's 2018 report, as well as the House Intelligence Committee's majority oversight report that we're releasing today, all come back to and confirm the same report. There was a gross politicization and manipulation of intelligence by the Obama administration intended to delegitimize President Trump even before he was inaugurated, ultimately usurping the will of the American people. I'm going to go over the key findings from the House Intelligence report, which investigated the claims that were made by an intelligence community assessment ordered by President Obama and published in January of 2017. First, Putin's principal interests relating to the 2016 election were to undermine faith in the U.S. democratic process, not show any preference of a certain candidate.
The notion that any adversary would want Democrats is absurd, completely absurd. Even criminals on the street would rather have Democrats as DAs or as mayors than Republicans. Why on earth would any adversary, forget just Russia, why on earth would any adversary, and they weren't adversaries, in 2008, President Obama campaigned on a Russian reset. But anyway, why would any adversary fear Democrats in any way, shape, or form at all? I mean, I'd like to know why. Why? And whether it's Trump, the Russians invaded Georgia, They took the Crimea under President Obama. They invaded under Biden with the largest invasion ever. I mean, in that region. So you think, like, what Democrat thinks that Putin is afraid of the Democrats? Like, no, he's not even. They're not even afraid of NATO. But let's just continue.
In fact, this report shows Putin held back from leaking compromising material on Hillary Clinton prior to the election, instead planning to release it after the election to weaken what Moscow viewed as an inevitable Clinton presidency. In the January 2017 intelligence community assessment that President Obama ordered, John Brennan, who was CIA director at the time, and the intelligence community intentionally suppressed intelligence that showed Putin was saving the most damaging material that he had in his possession about Hillary Clinton until after her potential and likely victory. The report goes into great detail about the information that Russia and Putin had on Hillary Clinton, which included possible criminal acts like secret meetings with multiple named U.S. religious organizations in which State Department officials offered in exchange for supporting Secretary Clinton's campaign for the presidency, significant increases in financing from the State Department. They also had documents that showed the patronage of the State Department to State Department employees who would go and support Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign. There were high-level DNC emails that detailed evidence of Hillary's, quote, psycho-emotional problems, uncontrolled fits of anger, aggression, and cheerfulness, and that then Secretary Clinton was allegedly on a daily regimen of heavy tranquilizers. Then CIA Director Brennan and the intelligence community mischaracterized intelligence and relied on dubious substandard sources to create a contrived false narrative that Putin developed a quote-unquote clear preference for Trump.
This company from Nashville.
Brennan and the IC misled lawmakers by referencing the debunked Steele dossier to assess quote-unquote Russia's plans and intentions, falsely suggesting that this dossier had intelligence value when he knew that it was discredited. The intelligence community excluded significant intelligence and ignored or selectively quoted reliable intelligence that contradicted the intelligence community assessment's key findings on Putin's alleged support for Trump. Including this intelligence reporting would have exposed the ICA's claim as implausible, if not ridiculous. The intelligence community assessment omitted reliably sourced information, such as how some Russian intelligence officials were quote-unquote planning for candidate Hillary Clinton's victory, while others assessed neither Trump nor Clinton would respect Russia's interests.
The whole premise was completely absurd. The reason that you elect a different president from the incumbent is that you want a different foreign policy. Inherent in choosing a different president, inherent in that victory is the understanding that the American electorate wants a different foreign policy. So they recreated a Cold War because we had that for 50 years. And once the Berlin Wall fell, we still had that in our national psyche. And so it wasn't difficult for them. They ran on a Russian reset. There's a picture of Hillary Clinton and the Russian a foreign minister holding a big reset button. Okay? And there was a Guardian article saying why Putin wants Obama over McCain. So it's like, and then President Obama says, oh, the 80s want their foreign policy back. They were laughing. And the Politico published an article about the DNC email that showed that Hillary Clinton's campaign wanted Trump. They actually wanted Trump because they thought he was too extreme. And so it's really, it's unbelievable also, like on a separate note, why do you think President Trump is sending the National Guard to these cities? Because possibly because he knows, or his administration, or Hegseth and others know, Bondi and Patel, and they know that widespread, spontaneous and completely, completely spontaneous, definitely not organized, definitely not part of a Democratic Party strategy, protests are almost certainly being organized for the next, year before midterms. Anyway, let's continue.
As was reflected in the ODNI documents that we released on Friday, multiple intelligence community assessments released in the months leading up to the November 2016 election concluded that Russia had neither the intent nor capability to impact the outcome of the U.S. election. On December 5th of 2016, the FBI and ODNI gave the House Intelligence Committee its first post-election classified briefing, in which there was no mention of Putin aspiring to elect Trump by either agency. The Presidential Daily Brief, drafted on December 8th of 2016, stated that no Russian or criminal actors impacted vote counts. This document was pulled just hours before it was to be published due to quote-unquote new guidance. If it had been published, it would have been briefed to both President Obama and President-elect Donald Trump. On December 9th, 2016, a National Security Council meeting was called to gather President Obama's senior national security officials, which included CIA Director Brennan, then Obama DNI James Clapper, Susan Rice, and others. Following that secret meeting, DNI Clapper's assistant sent an email to the intelligence community with the subject line, POTUS tasking on Russia election meddling, tasking ODNI leaders to create a new assessment per the president's request. The House Intelligence Committee oversight report that we released today reveals that, quote, unlike routine intelligence community analysis, the intelligence community assessment was a high-profile product ordered by the President Obama. It directed senior intelligence community agency heads and created an intelligence community assessment limited to just 5 analysts using one principal drafter. This is not something that occurs in the normal path of producing an intelligence community assessment that reflects the views across the intelligence community. The production of this intelligence community assessment was subject to unusual directives directly from the president and senior political appointees, especially the former director of the CIA, John Brennan. The House Intelligence Committee oversight report also shows how later that same day, on December 9th, Brennan ordered the publication of quote-unquote substandard reporting on Russian activities, which had previously been withheld from publication of prior assessments because the information was judged, quote, to have not met long-standing publication standards. Some of the information later used in the Obama-ordered assessment over the objections of veteran CIA officers was, quote-unquote, unclear or from unknown sources. The Intelligence Committee's oversight report reveals that CIA Director Brennan overruled senior CIA officers who challenged the Obama-ordered intelligence assessment.
And what are the chances these senior intelligence officials will be testifying against Brennan? See, if you work for the government, it's not like you have your own email, except if you're Hillary Clinton. Then you have your own email servers and dedicated staff, and, it's not a problem. It's, people would be, definitely, if they were at the FBI under Comey, they'd be under review, and they'd be under, they might get demerit. But they wouldn't be, of course they'd be criminally charged immediately. They wouldn't even be, they would be held in jail before with zero bail. But anyway, everyone, if you work for the government, your cell phone, your computer, it runs through government servers. All the text messages, all of the emails, that alone will prove perjury. But then you have people who are actual patriots, and people can say, "Oh, you're partisan." No, you're an actual patriot if you tell the truth and you explain, "Hey, you know what? They set up and framed Trump and Carter Page and George Papadopoulos and Michael Flynn and all these people who are patriots." Michael Flynn is a patriot. He served this country honorably, and he was set up and framed by President Obama's by Comey's Federal Bureau, by Comey's agents, or Comey and others who were running the Federal Bureau of Investigation and also the intel community, other agencies. But anyway, let's continue.
Stating, quote, "We don't have direct information that Putin wanted to get Trump elected." Yet, the Obama-directed assessment was published on January 6, 2017, which explicitly stated, quote, "We assess Putin and the Russian government aspired to help President-elect Trump's election chances, when possible, by discrediting Secretary Clinton and publicly contrasting her unfavorably to him." End of quote. The CIA and FBI, then led by John Brennan and James Comey, expressed high confidence in this judgment, while the NSA expressed moderate confidence.
The NSA was not on board. There's even an email from the NSA chief to Brennan and Comey saying, "Hey, we don't want to be on board with this." And the most hilarious thing of all of this, we have close to 500 people on the live stream now. The most hilarious thing is when you have partisans on the Democratic Party side saying, "Oh, well, why did the Russians, or why did the emails get dumped in certain times right before the election? These emails were dumped. Why do you think they were dumped?" Well, they were dumped to make the Democrats look bad. The Democratic Party was so utterly corrupt And the Clinton campaign had emails that were forwarded, classified data forwarded to Anthony Weiner, according to even James Comey. He testified that to Dianne Feinstein. They literally had classified data being forwarded from Uma Abedin to Anthony Weiner on Weiner's laptop. Lord knows what was on that laptop. Lord knows. You'd need a hazmat suit to even touch the laptop. And so it was so utterly corrupt. And the way the Democratic mindset is, oh, well, those emails were timed perfectly. Up until the last second before President Trump won, millions of people, including pollsters, thought that Clinton would win. There was zero. I remember I was the biggest Bernie Sanders booster on the internet, according to the Huffington Post. And the unofficial scribe of Sanders' most hardcore voters, according to the Washington Post. I don't have Twitter. I got out of Twitter in 2018. I don't have Facebook. Same thing, 2018. I don't have Instagram, nothing. I have my YouTube channels, and I'm going to grow H.A. Goodman's other channel. I could tell you when I was on Twitter, okay, the most vicious, venomous, vile people were the Clinton supporters who didn't like anyone. And it's embarrassing for me also to have been associated with the Bernie Sanders movement, which is whatever, a bowel movement now. I mean, he's just basically, he's probably in on the whole thing, but he was cheated by the Democrats. Yet another reason. And then Comey's memo sunk it for Clinton. That's really what signed me. She might have won without the Comey memo. But nobody, not one person, not one journalist ever thought that the WikiLeaks emails hurt Clinton's campaign in any way, shape, or form at all at that time, in real time, before Clinton lost. After Clinton lost, it was, oh, they were perfectly timed. Perfectly timed, oh my God.
Yet, as the report we released today shows, the ICA, the Intelligence Community Assessment, did not cite any report where Putin indicated helping Trump win was an objective. The opposite is true. With regards to the Steele dossier, we now know that one of the source documents that the Obama administration used in the creation of this intelligence assessment in January of 2017 was none other than the discredited, unverified Steele dossier. The House Intel report states, quote, contradicting public claims by then CIA Director Brennan that the dossier was not in any way incorporated into this intelligence assessment. The dossier was referenced in the intelligence assessment's main body text and further detailed in a 2-page assessment annex. John Brennan lied, and he denied using this dossier in this intelligence assessment that President Obama ordered because he knew it was discredited. It was a politically motivated, manufactured document. He directed senior CIA officials to use it anyway.
This credit card has an interest rate that's really
CIA officer told the House Intelligence Committee staff as they investigated this, quote, the director of the CIA, John Brennan, refused to remove it. And when confronted with the dossier's many flaws, responded, quote, yes, but doesn't it ring true? Even the bipartisan Senate Select Committee on Intelligence report published in 2020 criticized the FBI's handling of the Steele dossier, noting its completely unverified nature and purposeful sidestepping of intelligence community procedures in its use. Now, President Obama, Hillary Clinton, John Brennan, James Clapper, James Comey, and others, including their mouthpieces in the media, knowingly lied as they repeated the contrived narrative that was created in this January 2017 intelligence community assessment with high confidence as though it were fact. John Brennan, as CIA director, stated in a memo to his agency staff in December of 2016, saying, quote, there is strong consensus among us on the scope, nature, and intent of Russian interference in our presidential election. This was reported by NBC News, confirming that Brennan, along with James Clapper and James Comey, agreed with the CIA's assessment that Russia intervened to help Trump win the presidency. As Obama's Director of National Intelligence, James Clapper was tasked with overseeing the creation of this assessment in January of 2017 by President Obama, and he expressed confidence in its findings. In a 2018 interview with the Harvard Gazette, he talked about how he provided Trump with the same classified assessment that President Obama received, which included the high confidence judgment that Putin directly ordered the hacking and election interference. Clapper then went on to add, I think they, the Russians, actually influenced the outcome. This is a brief summary of the details that you'll find within the House Majority Staff's report in their investigation into the Obama-directed January 2017 Intelligence Community Assessment that leads us to the very same conclusion that we announced in the release of our documents on Friday. The implications of this are far-reaching and have to do with the integrity of our democratic republic. It has to do with an outgoing president taking action to manufacture intelligence to undermine and usurp the will of the American people in that election and launch what would be a years-long coup against the incoming President of the United States, Donald Trump. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Tulsi. And we do want to take questions on this topic while the director has time.
So watch and see if some of these questions are quite interesting.
For this topic, she will leave. I'm happy to take questions on other matters after that. But if anyone has questions for Director Gabbard, you're welcome to ask them. We'll start with our new media seat as always. Emily, go ahead.
Thank you. And Director Gabbard, this one is for you. Do you believe that any of this new information implicates former President Obama in criminal behavior?
We have referred and will continue to refer all of these documents to the Department of Justice and the FBI to investigate the criminal implications of this.
For even former President Obama?
Correct. The evidence that we have found and that we have released directly point to President Obama leading the manufacturing of this intelligence assessment.
It would not surprise me. First of all, I don't think there's any chance that President Obama is criminally referred or indicted at all. Zero chance. Zero. There are a lot of reasons for this, but primarily also, I think President Obama will probably help President Trump. It sounds completely absurd, but President Obama set up his administration, likely including himself, set up and framed Trump. But all of the people that under him, I don't think he cared for. Hillary Clinton included. I don't think President Obama likes Hillary Clinton, even likes Hillary Clinton. But all these people, Comey, Brennan, Clapper, I don't think he's enamored with any of these people, even though they're part of the same, side. So rather than even risk an indictment, I think he would probably, within, let's say, conversations with President Trump. What's the likelihood that President Trump is having conversations with President Obama? It's pretty high, actually. It's pretty high. Anyway, let's continue.
There are multiple pieces of evidence and intelligence that confirm that fact.
Ed, go ahead.
Director Gabbard, thank you. So just to, two questions, but to begin on that. The president yesterday, you've inferred that the former president helped lead a coup. Based on what you now see, do you believe President Obama is guilty of treason?
I'm leaving the criminal charges to the Department of Justice. I am not an attorney, but as I've said previously, when you look at the intent behind creating a fake manufactured intelligence document that directly contradicts multiple assessments that were created by the intelligence community, the expressed intent and what followed afterward can only be described as a years-long coup and a treasonous conspiracy against the American people, our republic, and an attempt to undermine President Trump's administration.
The Senate Intelligence Committee spent several years looking into this and unanimously agreed in a bipartisan fashion, Secretary of State Rubio was a member of that committee, that there was no political interference.
This is not true, though. There was no bipartisan agreement. A bipartisan agreement would mean the Freedom Caucus was also a part of it. You have never Trump Republicans saying Trump was, working with the Kremlin. That means nothing.
There was a years-long Justice Department investigation into this as well that also concluded no political interference. So help us, from a 50,000-foot level, explain, what do you now have that refutes those two conclusions?
I will encourage you, in my role as the Director of National Intelligence, my job, again, as I said when I came into this role, was to make sure that we are telling the truth to the American people and that we are ensuring that the intelligence community is not being politicized. So I'm not asking you to take my word for it. I'm asking you in the media to conduct honest journalism and the American people to see for yourself in the documents that we've released now, close to 200 pages, that point in multiple references, multiple examples, to include comments that have been made by senior intelligence professionals who are some still working within these agencies today that confirm the conclusions that we have drawn, that President Obama directed an intelligence community assessment to be created to further this contrived false narrative that ultimately led to a years-long coup to try to undermine President Trump's presidency.
And that's primarily the reason, in my opinion, that President Obama will just, turn on all of either turn or tell the truth that these people wanted. The thing is that President Obama does not want to risk an indictment. So he will not there's no way that he'll let Brennan and Comey and Clapper and all of these people, blame him for all of this. But anyway, hit subscribe to this channel. Tulsi Gabbard is a true patriot. Brennan will be indicted probably in the next couple of weeks. Hit subscribe. Thank you so very much. To my super chat, thank you so much.